how do we need to change the way we're teaching teachers so that they can address the changing populations, and how does that need to change in the future?
I think my comments about change being for communities needs to apply to higher ed institutes, teacher ed institutes, schools in general. Being open-minded and letting go of this is always the way we've done it. In higher ed, I think our obligation is to partner more with community organizations. I know at Drake we do look for opportunities to partner with community organizations that can bring in some knowledge about how to work with these changing populations and demographics, and that together our collective knowledge is always greater than Drake School of Ed trying to figure it out on their own. So it's really about partnering with our other organizations and a wide variety of people, staying current and being open to new ideas, but also just being responsive, knowing that what we've always done is not good enough, and that we have what I really feel is an ethical obligation to prepare teachers to meet the needs of all kids, and that looks different today than it has in the past, and so we need to be responsive to that.
Over here.
Just make a comment. I just want to say I've been involved with United Way of Central Iowa for the last 4 years, and I would say there's more collaboration in that organization with other community partners than I've ever seen before. I serve on the education cabinet, and I would say from being in my involvement with that, I've seen other organizations partner with United Way to look at how we can really work together to meet the needs and the changes that are happening here, not wanting to take credit over one over the other, but really partnering. So I do agree there's a lot of good things happening with Des Moines, and there's a lot of people looking to partner instead of take credit for things, and that is definitely a good change.
My question goes to this. We have obviously an increasing minority population. We're not seeing that translate into educators in the workforce. So how do we encourage a larger percentage of minorities to go into the field of education?
I know that at Drake, I can speak specifically to some efforts we're making at Drake. We have a partnership with DMAC, Des Moines Public and Drake, where we're looking at actively recruiting and supporting minority teacher candidates through DMAC onto Drake, and eventually hoping to find a job in Des Moines Public as a way to respond to that. One of the challenges is finding candidates who can meet the standards that the universities and other organizations have placed with some of the language and other issues, and just it all goes back down to the experience they've had in school getting up to the college point. So I think there are some things going on there. I know we recognize it as something we want to get more involved in. Don't have an easy answer, but I do think it's at the forefront of, I know at least our university, DMAC and Des Moines Public, that we do want to have kids, have teachers who maybe represent who they see as well. Experience in the English language is critically important to school success. One of the indicators that I think our state is responding to that is expanding and looking into expanding preschool opportunities for kids. And that will certainly help language acquisition and knowledge about language as kids enter the school system, so schools can be responsive to where our kids are at with that access.
For the adults, particularly in the workforce, what's available? How big a challenge is it for them, and what are the responses to that?
It's a challenge, and culturally, certainly in some families, when the kids have more language skills than the kids, it's than the parents. Excuse me. It's emotional too for the parents to know that they're maybe outskilled by some of their kids. So it's really about providing opportunities. We naturally do some of that. We do provide, some school districts do provide some of those opportunities for parents, but I would say it's quite limited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was in West Liberty a few years ago, and they have a program in which the students can enroll in a dual language program beginning in preschool. So Spanish and English for these kids throughout their entire education career. It's a remarkable success story. You close your eyes and you hear the Latinos speaking English and the English-speaking kids speaking Spanish, and you can't tell the difference. It is a truly remarkable program. Are there models out there that other school districts can adapt in order to make this
think valuing the dual language experience is certainly something the state needs to maybe look at and embrace. Such a skill, and I mean, I would love to be able to speak in multiple language with ease. Sometimes we viewed it as a deficit, and instead I think we need to change our mindset to really it's an asset for those kids moving forward. There are other school districts that is a good example, but I think it's really about exploring and figuring out what works best for each individual school district to embrace that.
It seems important that we spend a lot of time talking about the immigrant kids learning English, but it seems like a rich cultural experience for the English-speaking kids to learn these other languages as well. I would encourage more programs to be aimed at them in order to, learn the languages of their classmates.
Do you want to respond to that? Or?
Just, I mean, I think one of the things in being a higher ed professor, knowledge of language beside our own is always looked at as someone who's very educated, and I think it's valuable in the changing world that we are today, that it would be looked on favorably to learn 2, 3 languages, and that's something we haven't always embraced, and I definitely feel like it would be valuable.
Our next panel is diversity and Des Moines. Yes. Diversity and Des Moines. And I'd like to bring up our panelists. So we've got Michael VUKOVICH, who is the principal of North High School, Brenda VASQUEZ, who's a student at Roosevelt High School, Thomas Ahart, who's the superintendent of Des Moines Public Schools, and NOSA Ali, who is a student at Roosevelt High School, and finally Vin Nguyen, who is a program coordinator for ELL programs in Des Moines Public Schools. Our co-moderators for this panel are Matt VASILOGAMBROS, staff correspondent for National Journal, and Rekha Basu, who is a columnist for the Des Moines Register. Matt and Rekha, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, first off, it's really great to be back at Drake. I'm a Drake graduate, so this is a little surreal to be back here hosting a panel. Before I turn it over to Rekha for the first question, I wrote the series for Des Moines, and so yes, Des Moines is the hipster city that I labeled it, but there are other stories that we covered here, a lot of important ones, including the urban core that is struggling. When I talked to Superintendent Ahart earlier, he described the core as relating to Philadelphia or Detroit. And there's also the school district here that for many years has been majority minority, and only 45% of classrooms in Des Moines Public Schools are white. Latinos are 24%, and that's rising. And Asians are 7%, and that's rising as well. With the demographics changing, poverty is also increasing. In 1993, free and reduced lunches were only 33%. Today, they're 73%. So the school district is dealing with poverty. It's also dealing with more diversity, but test scores are on the rise, and graduation rates are on the rise. Dropout rates are going down. So maybe there's a lot that we can learn from the Des Moines School District, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Basu.
Thanks. First of all, Nat, I want to say you did a great job on that series of columns. You really managed to come into town and sort of penetrate the community very quickly. You all will appreciate this because you live here. Nat met with me and wanted to sort of brainstorm about some ideas. And of course, he's jetted in from Washington where, he's leading this very high-profile sort of life. And he says to me, so, how is it that you get to be out here in Des Moines, Iowa, living the dream? And I thought, I never thought of myself as doing that, but I suppose that's true. We kind of are. Things are really moving along here in a very nice way. And so I'm glad that you all have called this forum together to talk about these issues. So my first question is to you, Tom. When I first moved here from New York over 20 years ago, the big issue for schools was open enrollment and questions about how to make sure that there was enough diversity, ethnic diversity in each school by making sure that not enough white people left certain schools in order to ensure proportionality. How has this changing demographic in the last couple of decades affected that whole notion of open enrollment? And also, are you seeing much white flight as a result of the concentration, the growing numbers of people of color in the Des Moines schools?
I only have 17 minutes left on the clock, I see, to answer that question. Well, first of all, I've been living in Des Moines for 13 years now, and I've been working with the district for 7. And I can tell you that racial diversity among the schools in our district is amazingly similar. And part of that's been by design and how we've adjusted our attendance boundaries. But part of it is that the only minority policy we have in terms of open enrollment has to do with poverty. And so we do limit the outflow of non-poverty students and the inflow of poverty students to adjust to help keep a balance for where we currently are, just to maintain our current status. So, but white flight is a very interesting question. Hard to define that, hard to ask the right questions that people will honestly answer to understand what the real impact of that is. But certainly there would appear to be evidence of that. If you look at the demographics surrounding the Des Moines city proper, the ethnic diversity drops precipitously. We view it, and I think, speaking to Matt's point about how are we making the progress that we're making, I think fundamentally in Des Moines, we have, in the public schools and in the city at large, we have the attitude that diversity is a strength. It enriches our community. It enriches the experiences for all of our students. And quite frankly, it does get politicized, and it is interesting to see in our state where the different political stances are in regards to immigration. We feel like we're compassionate, but there's some pragmatism behind that as well, and I think that was illustrated very clearly in the last panel. We're foolish if we don't embrace immigration and help everyone who wants to be here with us, living the dream, be successful. So it's just, to me, it's really a no-brainer, and unfortunately, people just don't see the reality, I think.
And if I could just follow up on that white flight question, is the evidence of white flight from one neighborhood school to a different neighborhood school within Des Moines, or is it from Des Moines schools out to the burbs?
No, I would say it's from Des Moines schools out to the burbs, and we can document that actually pretty well just by looking building by building, and I look at those numbers pretty closely. We have a pretty amazing balance of racial and ethnic diversity among all of our buildings.
So let's explore one of those schools, and one of them is North High School, which 5 years ago was considered one of the worst in the state of Iowa. Bottom in terms of test scores. A very diverse school. Poverty is an issue for the school. Kids have jobs after school and during the weekends, and sometimes they're even playing, or they're even being parents to their younger brothers and sisters. Then things changed 5 years ago. Principal VUKOVICH, could you please tell me what happened 5 years ago and how North has gone from one of the worst schools in the state to test scores are up 20 points. And 5 years ago you had 11 students in AP classes, now you have over 600. How do you do that?
Well, that's a great question. I hear a lot about diversity, and that is a huge strength of ours. But one of the biggest things is we're a poverty-impacted school. And when our kids walk the halls, they don't see the diversity issue. They embrace all of those things because they're all suffering through the same situations that when they go home. Okay, they have many roadblocks that they run into that us as teachers are right there with them. And so our teaching staff, when we came in, the one thing I heard about North when we took over, and Matt Smith was the principal that was put in place to kind of lead the turnaround efforts. One of the things that everybody said about North High School is that staff truly cares about kids. And that is there's no doubt in my mind that is exactly what was happening. The issue was our expectations of what learning should be. And when we went into classrooms, we saw some kids sleeping. And when we talked to the teachers about why is this happening, they had a very good understanding. They knew that kid, and they knew that they were up late working and then watching their brothers and sisters while their parents were working the midnight shift. And they were responsible for cooking. And so all of these justifiable reasons to have these relationships with kids confounded and compounded itself into lower test scores, and we knew that statement of expectations had to be changed. Along with that, you can't raise the expectations and say, we're going to live up to this code and not have the support within it. And so one of the things that we talked about was our students, when they walk into the building, doesn't matter the diversity, it doesn't matter the color of the student, they need to believe that they can achieve when they walk through the door. And changing the mindset that they can take AP classes, that they can succeed in schools, was a huge piece of that. One of the little things that we went one-to-one. We gave every kid a laptop, and that was a huge piece. But it wasn't done just at the district level. That was federal money that we could get to help with that situation. The district stepped up and said, we need to invest in the school, the actual infrastructure of the school, to make sure that these kids understand that we care about them. They threw $14 million into renovating that school. We stood at the front and said, we are going to care about you and we are going to love you along the way, but you're going to live up to these expectations, and when you stumble, we're going to be there to pick you up. And so it was a transformational message across the board that we're not being insensitive when we wake them up. We are making sure they understand that that is crucial so that they can learn and then they can push themselves to doing that. And I want to make sure that everybody understands we still have a long way to go. We've done really good things, but embracing our community, because educating a child is a 360-degree effort. And we have to do a better job at North High School, reaching out to our parents and getting involved with the community to help embrace these kids so that when they leave our schools, that they're still feeling the support from the school. And the comment about before school activities and after school activities, the Des Moines district is putting their money where their mouth is and hiring people and getting really good people in place to increase those opportunities, because that is important for our kids. And at North High, any day you come by, we have our transformational group. We have pastors and people in the hallway, and we're building relationships with them to try and bridge that gap. It's still there, and we know we truly can't transform unless we get that done. But everything that we talked about today is really encouraging for me, because there's so many people in this room that want to help with that.
Well, so poverty is an issue for Des Moines Public Schools, but also English language learners. So Ron mentioned this earlier, that since the 1970s, since the fall of Saigon, that Governor Ray opened open arms policy toward refugees. And since then, Iowa has been a destination for global refugees. There's a joke that if you read the world section of the New York Times, you're going to know when the next wave of immigrants are coming from, the next wave of refugees are coming from. So Vin, you are the ELL director of sorts. You are also a refugee from Vietnam. And when you came, there's only 300 students in the ELL program speaking 5 languages. That's up to 6,100 students speaking 100 languages.
More than 100.
More than 100 languages and dialects. And so I was wondering, what sort of challenges do you face, because the refugee assistance is not there anymore, like it was when you came here. What are the challenges that you face when these students come into the classroom?
Well, there are many challenges and barriers for us in Des Moines Public School, but there isn't a better time to be in Des Moines Public School and working for Des Moines Public School. Like our superintendent have said, the compassionate that we have, we embrace the diversities. When you go back to 1975, the refugee effort was in the governor agenda. His priority, funding for us. He called the Iowan, the churches, the sponsors, and you have the entire state effort to embrace this part of the population. But now it's not the case. Right now, the refugee comes directly to Des Moines, Iowa. They have 90 days to survive. In this room right here, any of you can survive in a different country with no language support in 90 days. Please stand up. But that's what we have in Des Moines Public School. We have more than 2,000 students come from that particular background, refugee camps. Not that they have to live in the camp for 2-3 years like the Vietnamese or the Laotian or the Cambodian did. Many of our children were born in the camp. They never have formal education. They never receive appropriate education. They have no literacy in their first language, needless to say, English. So to learn English, you have to have access to the first language, which they don't have. They can speak, they can listen, but they don't know how to read and write. So yeah, indeed, we do have a very different situation, but like I said, there isn't a better time to be in Des Moines school.
Segue to hear from some of our students. And NOSA, I noticed in reading your bio that you have had a wonderful experience with the Des Moines schools, it sounds like, although you came here in that sort of situation that Vin is describing without having had a formal education. To what do you attribute your success, and what was it that the schools provided for you that gave you, sort of leveled the playing field so that you could start and succeed so well from a different place?
Well, when I first came to the United States, that was the first time I've ever been enrolled in school. And I received tremendous help from my first teacher ever, Mrs. Leek, who was my kindergarten teacher. And I received great mentorship from my ELL's mentor as well, Mrs. Peterson, who helped me with not only overcoming my language barrier, but she also believed that I could succeed in school. And they encouraged me to join art clubs, join different activities in school. I started playing the violin. I started joining the gifted and talented programs such as Science Bowl and several activities in school. So yeah, they encouraged me to join a lot of activities, and yeah, all that.
Incredible.
That's wonderful. And she's a refugee from Sudan.
Yeah.
I know she's wonderful. Well, hold your applause, because this next story is pretty good too. So Brenda's folks came here from El Salvador 20 years ago, and she's just been a rock star in the school district. You want to go to college, become a teacher, and then come back to Iowa so that you can be a teacher. And we talked about this last time, in the last panel, that the face of teachers and administration is not the face of the students in Des Moines Public Schools. So what does that mean to you to go out and become a teacher and come back to Iowa?
I think it's interesting that there's so many adults here. And like I go to school, I see the flaws in the education system, which is why I want to be a teacher. I see the flaws every day. I think that what the school system is missing is tolerance. Why is it that because I'm a Latina, because I'm from El Salvador, I'm not going to succeed? Why is it that because I'm black, I'm not going to succeed? That is what I see every day in the halls. And and it's not just students, it's teachers too. I feel like as a teacher, there is so much that you can gain from your job that most teachers don't do. They do the bare minimum, which is teach the subject that they are teaching. That's it. But if you connect with your students, if you tell them that they can succeed, they will succeed. Why do you think that it's the white kids that are going to school, that are going to college, and it's not the minority students? Because they don't receive that from their teachers.
So we have about 3 minutes left, and I'll let Rika take the last question. But if you have a question, please start lining up right now then.
Actually, I'd love to hear some response to what Brenda just said from either of you, Michael or Tom.
Well, I think that Brenda brings up a very good point, and by the way, she does have a job waiting for her. So if you could accelerate, that'd be awesome. Yeah, North has dibs, I guess. You know, we've been actively exploring how can we do a better job of communicating that. The message that I know that Mike shares at North, and that certainly we had at Harding when I came to the district and the same North Side neighborhood, is we're not teaching. You're not content area teachers. You're teachers of students, and the absolute fundamental building block of what happens in our district is the relationships that are built among our students, but more importantly, the relationships built between the students and the teachers. And we are actively recruiting for that disposition when we're looking for teachers. And recently, actually, this is our second year now that we've administered the Gallup Student Poll, which measures hope, well-being, and engagement. And we're using that data to actively inform the individual school improvement plans, because we can have the best strategies to instruct students in content areas. But if we are not forming those strategies and implementing strategies that are taking actively into account our students' perspective, then we're clearly going to be missing the boat a large percentage of the time. And so we're early on in that process, but we think it's going to be a fundamental piece of how we continue to accelerate progress, because the students, as Brenda said, have a tremendous amount to teach us. We need to listen.
Do all teachers in the Des Moines school, I'm sorry to interrupt you, do all teachers have mandatory training in multicultural interactions and diversity?
Yes, and we're developing improved programming actually this year that all of our teachers will go through. Yes, but certainly we have a long way to go, and this is not a one-year effort. You know, we'll continue to spiral that so that we continue to deepen the understanding and the sensitivity that our teachers have, because each of us comes from different backgrounds, and certainly, as Vin just barely hinted at, we know the birth country of a little over half of our students, and we know we have students that were born in at least 88 different countries. Just that alone, not to mention the language diversity, the cultural diversity, economic diversity, we have a tremendous amount to learn if we're going to truly connect and build relationships with each one of our 33,000 students.
Well, and one of the things I was going to say is a lot of what Brenda was talking about is not understood by the teacher. A lot of what she's talking about is the cultural proficiency. And for us to truly understand that it's our nonverbals, it's the way that we address people, it's the way that we stand even. It's all the different things that don't just come naturally to say, but I love them. Well, yes, you do, but are we always exhibiting this mode of you can succeed in everything that we do? So it's unintentional, but it's happening. So the cultural proficiency piece and what Dr. Ahart alluded to is we need to get better at that. Administrators, downtown, at the building level, teachers, custodial, food service workers, everybody can improve and can get better in that. And it is a big piece of that, because when you talk to students, you do hear that. It's not that the teacher is intentionally doing it. There's a lot of things that they don't understand that they're doing that is making students feel that way, and we have to address that.
Well, let's take some questions now. We have a lot, so we'll start right here. Please introduce yourself as well.
I'm Greg Karras. I'm Executive Director with the Des Moines Education Association. I've been in Des Moines for 7 years. I'm a former teacher from Little Rock, Arkansas. And with the No Child Left Behind, teachers had to change, some of the things that they used to do. When I used to be in the classroom, I could spend, more time, mentoring kids and doing, field trips and those kinds of things. I left the classroom in 2000 to start working as a staff person with the union. My question is, with all the changes, on the federal front, with the No Child Left Behind, and I know that it haven't been reauthorized, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Teachers cannot do all the things that they used to do, with different activities that try to help, build morale and that sort of thing. They do some of it, but not as much as they used to, because, the test, you have to, reach a certain status, or the public may say you're a bad teacher or you're not performing well in the classroom. So I want to know what can be done, to make those changes where teachers can do that, and you still, have the score of the test. What can you do to change that nationwide?
Well, Superintendent Ahart and I talked about this a lot during our meeting. So briefly, would you mind addressing that?
We have, and I shared this with a Greater Des Moines partnership, a new committee trying to engage the education community with the business community. And what I shared about a week and a half ago is I said, shame on us for bending to really using the federal mandates for the last, really since the reauthorization in the early 2000s that they entitled ESEA, No Child Left Behind. We really in Iowa have defaulted to using that as how we measure our educational output. And what we've been trying to change the conversation to in Des Moines is talking about student development instead of student achievement. In Iowa in particular, we don't even have a good measure for what we say we value in terms of reading, math, and science. And so it makes it easier for me to set that aside and not hold that as the only measure of value. But if we really want to have different results from our education system, then we need to have a good, legitimate accountability system. And we need to sit down and say, what is it that we really value? We cannot just say that we want every student to be proficient in math and science and then just do it louder and longer. And that's really what the model is. That's kind of the premise behind No Child Left Behind. We have a much more complex challenge on our hands, a much more complex challenge. And so it is going to take, not just at the federal level, but in Iowa especially, at the state level, let's put a flag in the ground and say this is really what we want from our system, and then design the accountability system around that. Because right now, if you take in diversity, which we absolutely embrace, and I wouldn't want to work anywhere else, we are not supported in a way that the state demonstrates that we do value having students. You know, we've opened our arms to immigrants, as Vin said, since the early 70s. But we've done that only in words and not deed since that support went away.
Hi, my name's Kelly Donnelly. I'm the director of Grace Preschool, which is an early childhood center in the Drake neighborhood. And I do have to say, I went to a North homecoming football game, and they were the most welcoming students that I've ever been around. They even invited me to the free hamburgers and what else was going on. So I do see that engagement in that community where someone might not see that. One of the questions I have is because of a challenge that we have at our private sector of the universal preschool and even our 2 through age 5 preschool program is reaching the children that need us the most. I see a lack of support. There's not much out there for dual language learners in the early childhood sector. And we also know, according to brain research, as early as 6 months, it's so important to start getting that dual language for both the second language learners and the children who already have the English there. And I'm wondering, just speaking to Mr. New, is that correct? Give your name. Is there a secret or a way other than trying to find transportation to tap into those communities?
One of the things, if you want to have a very productive preschool program, transportation have to be part of it. Because our parents, they need to either work, you know, for example, people in Des Moines, they don't work in Des Moines. Most of our refugee and immigrant parents actually travel out to Perry or Marshalltown to work in their meat packing plant there. So they left home with their wife, the homemaker, with their little children. So therefore, if you don't have transportation, you actually defeat the purpose of providing that preschool for them. So you can see that they are lack up 1 year of education before they come to kindergarten there. So I would suggest that you work with Metro bus transportation here in Des Moines Public School. Create the route that you know exactly where they're going to hit big apartment complexes. You know, when you look at Des Moines area, you look at Northwest area, you see 3,800 MLK. We have a large apartment complex with a lot of refugee and immigrant there, and then 3,000 Douglas, 2,400 Hickman and Southside. So if you are able to work with the city to make sure you maneuver the bus route exactly the time you provide services to these kids, it will be a win-win situation for us.
Yeah, and especially when we look at 2043, I'm thinking, are we really reaching those children at this moment? So do you see a lack of that connection with the young families?
There's a lot of factors come into this. Hopefully, you know, with the new refugee and immigrant population that we have in our school system, it will take much longer for them to really acculturate and integrate into the main society or Des Moines city. It will take more time than it used to be for the refugee back in the 70s and 80s or the Bosnian refugee. That's just the facts, because the lack of support from the government. They lack of English classes, they lack of transportation, they lack of many things that really help them to integrate in the social setting as soon as possible. You can't be function in 90 days of support. You can't. You know, therefore, right now, you see a lot of refugee parents and immigrant parents are working, struggling throughout the education. They always think that's the way to go and everything else, but lack of opportunity for them to access it. So,
and you know, I spoke to Mrs. Greenwood, NOSA's ELL instructor during my reporting here, and they have classes for parents about what is a dishwasher, and how does, you know, just different things that we think are every day that they need to teach to these parents because they're coming straight out of a refugee camp and they were not exposed to that. Yes, next question.
I'm Alejandro Forosantis, United Methodist pastor. I'm from Guatemala. I'm a new immigrant here in Iowa. I just want to make a comment, and I think it will be very important. I was really curious about how the conversation was going to be framed. And so I've heard several times, you know, like white people will not be the majority, and mathematics is not my strong suit, but last time I checked, 42% is bigger than 24, 25 or something. And I think that has to do something with how you frame the conversation in terms of fear, because once people hear, you know, white people are not going to be the majority, some people say, oh, that's cool, there's going to be a lot of diversity, but some other people think like, oh, holy cow, like it's going to be bad, you know? And in reality, white people are going to be the majority, because what I hear, and this is very subtle, right? It's like, it's 48% of us white people and 52% of you people. And people, of course, were not all the same. And there's a lot of richness, and there's a lot of diversity in that. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question about a specific group of children, young people in schools, and that is the Dreamers. I know across the nation it's about 500,000 Dreamers, and I'm so impressed with the Dreamers I've worked with in terms of their inspiration, in terms of their intelligence, and in terms of their civic responsibility. Many of these young people are involved politically and civically. Mike, but also the downside is they live in great fear, great anxiety. There's going to be a knock at the door and they can be deported. The president's temporary DACA has given them a reprieve, but the Republican vote to deport them has, again, ramped up that concern. Do we know how many Dreamers are in Des Moines Public Schools? And do you give them any special insights into the obstacles they're going to face at graduation because they don't have status?
I do not know how many Dreamers we have in Des Moines Public Schools. There are a number, and we do work with them. Maybe not specifically around that status, but certainly we have, aside from the Dreamers, we certainly have lots of students who are undocumented that have some challenges, regardless of what their status looks like relative to the Dreamer issue.
Could I just follow up with a question, Tom? What is the policy with regard to the schools being allowed to or not being allowed to ask about a kid's immigration status when they're applying for admission?
Not allowed to ask.
Because there was a story recently involving a Rwandan kid.
Yeah, that was not that was about a residency issue. This was a student that was visiting the country on it's a sort of a complicated story, but on a visitor's visa. And we've actually, Des Moines is one of the few districts in the state that has actually sought approval from INS to legally take in students who are on student visas so that they can attend school in the United States. And we have a lot of families that take advantage of that every year. And that's a good way to help them eventually get into the country permanently. There are certain rules we need to follow there. And so there was not, the status of the student immigration-wise was never sought from us.
And statewide, that's the law. You're not allowed to ask. Schools are
Right.
not allowed to ask.
Right.
Well, we are running out of time, so let's just do these last two right here. So, ma'am?
I'm Debbie Chapman. I'm the principal at Amos Hyatt Middle School here in Des Moines. And my question is, Dr. Ahart is doing a remarkable job with taking some of the pressure off the principals as far as the big test. But as for some of the other in the audience and just our communication plan with others, we've started looking at, for instance, our last unit was on tone and author's purpose. and we had all of these students who were showing non-proficient on that. However, when we gave them an article in their native language and then asked what the tone and the author's purpose of that article was, the majority of the students could answer those questions correctly. So it was not that they weren't learning what we were teaching, it was that they couldn't read the text that had some very unimportant vocabulary that you do not need to know to be successful in the United States. However, when these students then take the state test, take the ACT, take anything else that is going to lead to them becoming a teacher or going to college, it's going to demonstrate that the students at Hyatt are not learning what's being taught. They are learning what's being taught. They're not learning how to read the unimportant vocabulary in the text that we're giving them. So I appreciate the fact that all of our pressure no longer is placed on the Iowa assessment, because some of our students are a long way from being able to read that assessment and answer correctly. But what communication things are in place to try to allow us to convey what our students do know compared to the state standards, and other ways for them to show that to colleges, to the ACT, to other things that are going to open those doors for them.
Excellent. Is that for me? Dr. Chapman?
How, and I know you're telling us the pressure is off of us, and
Well,
I appreciate that,
no, Dr.
but
Chapman,
it really still is there.
That was really, and you illustrated it more clearly than I did, but that really, to my point, is if we genuinely value diversity, and we do value all the richness that our immigrants bring to the state, we absolutely do. And we also think that even if it's just for pragmatic economic reasons, that we need to develop the capacity of all of these folks in an academic sense, then why are we not doing some fundamental changes in our educational system in how we provide resources, but also how we measure progress? We can't just, and I know Vin appreciates this better than most, we can't just go slower and louder and longer and think that we're going to make the kind of progress that I think all of us wants.
Very, very briefly, yes. Last question.
And for me, Dr. Chapman, if 30% of your ELL population achieve the reading proficiency or the math proficiency, clap your hand, 30%. Because it is when the federal law and NCLB put on English language learner, they have to have 3 AMAO. They have to learn language at the same time achieve the reading test. If they achieve the reading test, they don't have to be in the program. You can see the backwardness. So therefore, 30% of your population, achieve the reading or math. That's where to go. Proud to what you have. Yes.
My name is Claudia Thrain, and I work for American Friends Service Committee. When I moved here, I applied for different companies. I was a new immigrant, speaking English with a big accent, but speaking English. One company called me, and I passed all the tests. I failed one. That was the language one. And I failed the Spanish one, which was incredible for me because, I'm from Mexico. I think I speak Spanish. But anyway, there was another story not a long time ago. A guy named Jose, when he changed his name to Joe, started getting offers. And that tells you a lot. One of the biggest problems, I've been working along with the school system. They've been making a lot of strikes, definitely, with the DHS system, juvenile court, different systems, and private sector too. One of the problems that I see is that we don't hire the right people. Usually when you go and they interview you, they don't understand your culture, they don't understand anything about you. That's one of the biggest problems we have. East High School has, I believe, I don't want to say numbers that are false, but the population, the Latino population is very, very high, and East High. We have 2 Latino people working there. So one of the problems is that the staff is not mirroring the student body. And I know it can be a challenge, but maybe we can make a bigger effort to hire these people. And when you are hiring these people, you also have to have somebody that understands their culture too. So I think I see this as a cycle, and that is a big, big problem for all minorities.
And I think that's a good point that we've addressed a couple times. But I think that we've found that while there are improvements, there's a lot that needs to be done here in Des Moines Public Schools, as with many school districts across the country, that deals with increased diversity, poverty, but also is up to task. So, Reka and Mike, Brenda, Tom, and NOSA, and Vin, thank you so much for participating in the panel, and thank you for listening.
So next up we have our keynote. The Honorable Catherine Lehman is the Assistant Secretary for the Office of Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education. She's going to provide keynote remarks, and then she's going to sit down with Ron Brownstein for a Q&A. So Catherine?
Thank you all for this very exciting conversation and for this very exciting conference. I think it's so important that we have the conversation, that we do the work that we're doing now. This is the way that we change and increase and maximize diversity and acceptance in our schools and in our country. Being able to meet the students, meet the educators, meet the community that builds the community toward greater diversity is the way that we make the change, and it's incredibly exciting. So I'm thrilled to be able to have 5 minutes of keynote remarks and a bit longer discussion with Ron and with all of you. Following that, as the introduction mentioned, I am Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the United States Department of Education. So it is my job to make sure that we are delivering educational opportunity on an equal and effective basis for all of our students. It's really exciting to me to hear the kinds of changes that are underway already and in progress, and very successful progress here in Des Moines. I want to give you a little bit of national perspective about what's happening in addition to what's happening here in Des Moines. What we see in the Office for Civil Rights through our civil rights data collection, which is a snapshot of the equity health of our public schools, K-12, P-12, all over the country, is that we still have distance to travel to be able to deliver for all of our students. The disparities that we see in opportunities in our schools are very, very stark. Starting with school discipline, we see across the country that black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled from school than their white counterparts. We know that those disparities start at a disturbingly early age. Black students are 18% of our preschool students, but they are fully 42% of the preschool students who are suspended once, and 48% of the preschool students who are suspended more than once. I say preschool students. This is the first year that we actually looked at the data about suspension and expulsion rates for our preschool students. They are 3 and 4 years old. So we are saying to our babies in preschool that you are not what we're looking for in school, and our schools are not ready for you. That message translates to kindergarten, it translates to middle school, it translates to high school. They take it home and they hear from their schools that their schools don't expect them to succeed. That's not the way that we should start our schooling, and that's certainly not the way that we should finish our schooling. But we're doing it, and we're doing it all too often in our schools. Thank you for that. Looking away from the preschool and the suspension and expulsion to the college and career readiness that we offer for our students, and what it is that we have for our students in the high rigor coursework that's available, we also see very, very stark disparities, so that we know that our students are not equally able to access the courses that they need to be able to graduate ready for the careers that they want, or ready for the colleges that they want to attend. Nationwide, just 57% of black students and 67% of Latino students attend high schools that offer the full range of math and science courses. That's just being in a school that offers the courses. That doesn't even get to the question of whether you can take them in sequence and you're ready and you're prepared for those courses. But we have 2/3 of our Latino students and more than 2/3 of our black students not even in schools that have the courses ready for them. So we are not sending a message to those students that we expect them to succeed, that we're ready to educate them, and that we will prepare them for their futures. That is not not the America that we want to live in. That is not the educational promise that we say that we will deliver for our students. And we can and we must do better. The experience that we're talking about here about increasing diversity is a stark and important reminder for us that we have to change those practices so that we are ready for each of our students in every school, and that we are communicating to them that they are the beloved, valuable learners that we heard from the North Principal that they are, and that I very much agree with. I want to tell you what we do about some of those disparities and what we do in the Office for Civil Rights to make sure that we can deliver the opportunity for our students. So I'll just tell you two stories. One is from a resolution that we entered into in Alabama a year ago, in a district that's 23% black, that has 4 high schools. One of those high schools is over 90% black. In that high school, until 3 years ago, that district had never once offered a single advanced placement course. Never once. And when they offered their first advanced placement course 3 years ago, they offered it without a teacher. It was online only. So they said to those kids that we expect you to succeed, but we're not going to give you the courses, and when we do give them to you, we're not going to give you a teacher to learn with. The principal, when we investigated that district, the principal at that school said to my staff that he didn't think that black kids could succeed, that he thought that his kids needed remedial education, and that's why they didn't offer those courses. The good news is that he's not the principal anymore at that school, so we start there. But the even better news is that district has committed to offer high rigor courses, including advanced placement courses, at that school to all of their students, and they've committed to bring in a consultant to go back to kindergarten to develop a pipeline so that the kids will be ready to succeed in the high rigor courses when the district is offering them to them, and is communicating to those kids, we expect you to succeed and we will be ready for you. So I'm thrilled about that. Another even more recent example is from a district in Colorado where the district had operated a hostile environment for the Latino staff and for the Latino students. I'm going to tell you a particularly harrowing story about a little boy who was bleeding on the play yard, and he was left for hours without medical attention that he needed for his injury because his teacher insisted that the monolingual Spanish-speaking child must be able to describe in English what had happened to him before he could get the medical attention that he needed. That's appalling. That should not happen anywhere. And the experiences of the staff at that school who were told they couldn't speak Spanish to their students, that they couldn't speak Spanish to each other at the school, who were subject just to an ongoing hostile environment, which was communicating both to the staff and to the students that they were not welcome there and that this was not a district that was ready to educate them. That has changed. They are now receiving training. They've changed their practices. They will support all of their students. And really terrific news is that the school board president at a recent community meeting apologized to the community for having perpetuated that hostile environment. So we're seeing real progress there, we're seeing real change, and we see continuing need to have the conversation that we're having here and to be in conversation together so that we can deliver and support for all of our students. So I'll stop there and join conversation with Ron and look forward to conversation with all of you as well.
Thank you. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us. So, we've talked a lot today about this being an historic moment in the history of American schools where a plurality of our students are still white, but a majority of our public school students nationwide are kids of color. And as that overall change has happened, it's not only deepened, but as we've said, it's diffused. We've calculated 310 of the 500 largest districts are now majority minority. So I'm wondering, as you look at diversity diffusing into places that might not have known much of it in the past, are there particular challenges or problems that creates? Is it different as you're seeing places that did not have the experience of a New York or Dallas or LA with diversity try to adapt to it?
I don't view it as a challenge. I view it as a real opportunity. For me, these are the kids we want to educate. This is our future, and this is what we want for all of our students. And so being able to actually think about how do we do the work that's being done here in Des Moines in really successful ways. How do we make sure that we educate all of our students who are diverse language learners, who are diverse socioeconomic status, who are diverse in terms of race and national origin? How do we meet them where they are and deliver the education that they are guaranteed? It is exciting, is important, and is the future. It is what we want our kids to be prepared for when they go out into the workforce, what we want our kids to be prepared for when they complete schools so that they're ready to be full and productive members of our society. So it's trickling further in ways that I think are important and were predictable. So here we are in that reality, and we need to be able to serve all of the students in ways that we're ready for, and we ought to meet that challenge.
And what are the biggest obstacles that you find students facing in the districts that are changing rapidly, that have not seen the diversity before?
you know, I want to push the premise a little bit. I think that students in districts that haven't been changing rapidly also face obstacles, right? I mean, so I'm from Los Angeles, new to Washington, D.C. as of about a year plus ago. And, you know, we see continuing challenge in Los Angeles as well as in California and New York and in the places where we've known diversity for a long time. We haven't met our kids where we ought to meet them in those places, in addition to the places where we're seeing increasing diversity happen. So I think that the challenge is present across the country, and the challenge is take every child for the beloved human being that child is, communicate to that child that we expect you to learn, that we are prepared for you, and we will be there for you. That's the challenge of schooling. That's the challenge of education. That's the challenge anywhere.
I have read a rather fierce set of academic papers over the last many months on both sides of this question. Are American schools becoming more or less racially segregated as we go through this change?
Well, American schools are disturbingly racially segregated, period. More or less, they are, in ways that we ought to change. The reality is that northern schools are more segregated than they ever have been, that all too many southern schools are reverting back to segregation, and we are not seeing the kinds of schooling that the Supreme Court promised us that we should see in the Brown versus Board of Education decision, and that I want for our kids. So from the perspective of the desktop, for the students who are in school today, whether it's more or whether it's less, it's bad. It needs to change. And we need to know that we can deliver the schools that we want for all of our kids so that we have the rich opportunities that are available in the diverse schools that are serving kids well. I'm a parent. I have 2 elementary school daughters. They attend schools that are gloriously, amazingly diverse. And that is the school that I want for every child. That is the opportunity that I want for every child. And we can achieve that.
Even in the schools that are diverse, to what extent do you see diversity in the classroom, and to what extent is segregation within integrated schools a challenge?
Yeah, it's an enormous challenge. So in my 2 daughters' schools, it's amazing, and I'd like to see that in more places. But I grew up in a district that didn't have a lot of families that looked like mine. There were very few black families in the district I grew up. I actually grew up in Northern California, in Palo Alto Unified School District. And you know, when I was there, I and 2 other kids would be the only black kids in the courses that I was in, even though we were busing kids in from the neighboring school district as a part of a desegregation order. We had enormous tracking in the schools that I grew up in. I see that continue today and persist today. And you know, when I was talking about the statistics about the rates of offering of high rigor coursework in our schools, when we say that there are 2/3 of kids who are attending schools that don't even offer the high rigor courses to them, we know that they don't have the opportunities. But when we look underneath those numbers and we see who's in those classes, who's taking those classes in those schools, even when they offer them, they're not offering to all of their kids on an equal basis. And that's something that we need to change. We really need to be able to say, we know that we can access those courses for everyone.
So according to the data your office has collected, which is available on this incredible interactive website, you can go down to any school district in the country. Here in Des Moines, the numbers look like this. Whites are just under half of the overall district students, but they are 51% of the kids taking the SAT, 56% taking chemistry, 58% taking algebra, 61% of the students taking calculus, and 65% of those taking AP test. How does that kind of disparity compare to nationally? Is that a relatively good or relatively weak performance?
Well, it's a poor performance, right? I mean, what that is consistent nationally, but it's very, very disturbing to me. I mean, you know, what we're saying is that we are reserving our expectations for our highest rigor courses, for the courses that we know our kids need to be able to be full and productive members of society, but we're reserving them for a class of kids who are white and who are wealthier. And we know we can't do that if we want to be the rich and diverse nation that we are, and if we want to actually be able to deliver for all of our communities. But we see that all too often, and we're changing that. So if you'll indulge me, we just entered into a resolution agreement with the school district in California, Elk Grove Unified School District, where we looked at just this question of rates of course taking in gifted and talented education programs and in advanced placement programs, and the disparities were very like the numbers that you just read off here for Des Moines. And we said, you know, there's a racially disparate impact. We need to be able to make sure that we have full access to that kind of coursework for all of our students. And the district has agreed in ways that I'm really excited about to partner with us to expand that access. So they're not pushing anybody out. out. They're not saying to a set of kids, you will no longer have access to those courses. They will continue to have access, and they'll expand the access so that more students of color can participate in those courses as well, and they can make sure that they're doing the outreach to let the families know about the courses, that they're changing the way that they evaluate who can have access to those courses. So we'll see more kids participating. We can do that. We can do that all over the country. We need to be doing it, and we need to change our mindset so that we're thinking about every kid as a valuable learner.
What are the tools you have to close those gaps? Is it enforcement district by district? There are a lot of districts. How do you, are there any ways to systematically close it? And in a case like the one you just cited, what are the best practices that districts can apply to try to close some of those gaps for the more advanced work?
So taking the first question first, we use every tool at our disposal. Certainly we will do the district by district enforcement work, and I'm pleased to have 600 people in 12 regional offices around the country actively involved in doing that. And that's not enough. We need to do more, right? So the civil rights data that you identified that is rich and available at ocrdata.ed.gov, please use it. It is something that our communities can advocate for and with to see what change they want in their own community. Use it yourselves. We're seeing those changes in ways that I find enormously exciting. Conversations like this are ways to change behaviors and change the conversation in ways that I think are really important. So we use the bully pulpit. We put out guidance saying what it is that we expect from schools. We just recently put out guidance just specifically on this topic to communicate to every educator all over the country that this is what we expect, this is what our laws demand for our students, and where people are missing that and not there, we're prepared to be there in the enforcement work as well. So we will use every tool that we can, and we're asking to be in active partnership with communities all over the country to get what you want for your community as well. And then on what are the best practices, some of the best practices are reach out to your families and let them know about the availability of those courseworks and talk to them about it. Some of them are change your own expectations. Look at your tests and see whether the tests are keeping people out. And is there another way to evaluate who could be in and take a look at that. Some of that is look at your kids and say to them, you could succeed, what could you do? Think about what your future can be. I mean, you know, we have the tools in our backpacks now. I'm going to give you another concrete example if you don't mind. Sure. We entered into a resolution agreement last year in Cleveland where the district offered just amazing STEM courses to students. They offered to kids in high school the opportunity to watch live surgeries as part of their high school, which was something that I never had in high school. It's amazing to me that the kids had access to it. But seats were going unfilled in the district, even in these amazing STEM courses. And when we examined why that was, we realized that the district wasn't communicating to the families in Spanish, that their English learner kids could take the courses and they would be ready for them, and that there would be transportation available to them, and that the kids would be welcomed in those classes. And so the district has committed to advertising to families in Spanish so that they would know about it, making sure that English language learners can be supported in those classrooms. And we expect to see those seats filled now. So it was, they were offering the classes, they were paying for them already, but they didn't have enough people taking advantage of it because they weren't communicating that well enough. And so it's a shift of the dial to be able to get there.
In the previous panel, Brenda, the student, rather eloquently, not talking about the language issue specifically, but an expectation issue, a kind of a sense of like, who do you expect to see in the desk, in that room on a track to college? That's right. That schools me. So we've touched a couple times, and you mentioned a little bit in your talk without really explaining where some of this data that we're talking about comes from, that you have, your office recently, for the first time since 2000, did a census of all 97,000 public schools in the U.S., all 16,500 school districts, looking at issues like suspension, discipline, access to advanced courses, graduation. You called it a snapshot of our equity health, is what you called it in your remarks. What are the most important things you learned in that snapshot? What should people in a local community be looking for as they kind of assess how their district stacks up?
So I think we should look at everything, and thank you for highlighting what that snapshot is. Every 2 years we put out our data. I love it too, and I love people using it. So every 2 years we put out the civil rights data collection. Typically when we've done it, it's been a snapshot only. So we've had to extrapolate from the few districts that we highlight information from to make national estimates. This most recent one, as you point out, Ron, was universal. So for each of the 49 million public school students all over the country, every data point represents a life in a school. It represents an actual kid. It's not a projection. It's not an estimation. So when we look at that and we see the rates of disparity in school discipline, or we see disparities in teacher absentee rates in schools, or we see disparities in rates of bullying in school, we can see what's happening. What are we communicating to our kids? What's available to our kids? What offerings do they have? And then we can ask questions to get underneath it. But each of us can do it. And that's one of the things that I think is so so exciting about it. We use it in our enforcement work in the Department of Education, but we've also seen families using it. We've seen educators using it. We've seen states, districts coming together saying, what can we do differently for our kids? Do we have a concern? Even this year was the very first time we looked at the preschool suspension data that I highlighted, and we just put this out in March. We've already seen whole districts changing their practices so that they are dramatically reducing rates of preschool suspension and expulsion just in response to the data. We haven't even spoken with our enforcement voice on that topic yet. So we know that we can see dramatic changes that are in response to it, and it's disaggregatable by sex, by disability status, by English learner status, by race. So you can look at your own district, your school, your state. I mean, it's really a rich trove of ways to take a look at, are we doing what we say we ought to be doing in our schools? And if not, or if it looks like maybe not, what questions do we need to ask and what do we need to do?
About their own district, right?
That's
you
right.
can go on and another thing that diversity has brought is diversity of language. And here we heard that a lot in the previous panel. Over 100 languages and dialects here, which is a number you might expect to see more in LA than in Iowa. Speaking broadly, how are our schools meeting the challenges of English language learners?
We're not. I mean, speaking broadly, we're not. And that's an actual travesty for each of us. This is a country where we are going to rely on people's ability to do the work, be trained, vote, be part of our community. Civic engagement is something that we intend to instill through schools. So when we don't serve our kids on any dimension of who those kids are, we do ourselves a disservice. We are not today serving our English language learners in ways that hurt all of us. The story that I described of the district in Colorado breaks my heart. I mean, it's horrifying to me that that's the way that we would treat kids. But I see it all over the country. I see it in Pennsylvania. We just entered into a resolution agreement there where some 241 kids who are English language learners just weren't being served in the district. We saw it in Arizona where we had to enter into a resolution agreement in Arizona where they were removing kids from English language learner training and recognition of the status well before they had actually achieved English language proficiency. So, we really need to see actual support for all of our students across every dimension of every language that they speak, making sure that they are served in the ways that was so exciting to me from the last panel, hearing about what we can do in the ways that our educator, Mr. Nyan, was, I think, too humble in what he said in the last panel. He didn't talk about what we know to be true, which is that he researches the countries that the kids are from, their experiences, so that he can serve them and welcome them and make sure that they know that their school is there for them. That is what we ought to be doing everywhere, all over our country. That is how we should be serving our kids. He's an amazing paragon for what it is I think that we want to see, and we could see that in more places.
Let me ask you about another issue that came up in the last panel. How well, if you look nationwide, how well does the teacher corps reflect the changing face of the student body, and how much does that matter?
It matters hugely, and it doesn't. And our teacher corps doesn't reflect the changing face of our student body. And historically, over time, it never has. Right? That comes from racial segregation in job access. Right? Where even in racially segregated by law schools of the type that my mother attended growing up, white people were who had access to those jobs as well, right? So, we didn't expect black teachers to be able to teach black kids. We didn't expect to be able to, and we didn't actually allow people into those jobs. So that's the history that we start from. And then as we progress forward to today, we don't have those laws anymore saying you don't have access to the jobs, but we do have clear expectations about our kids. And frankly, even some of the things that we've heard today about, the standards can be too high and it's too hard to get people in. There's nobody's genes that stops them from being able to teach. There's nobody's genes that stops them from being able to deliver high rigor instruction for all of our students. We need to be clear that we communicate that welcomeness and that we work toward it. There were times when we had more legal tools available to offer that as well, and my office was actively participant over the decades in changing the racial demographics of the teaching forces in our schools in a way that I would like still to be able to have those tools. The Supreme Court has limited the availability of that tool in ways that I find dismaying, and so it ties my hands behind my back now. But we still have things that we can do to make sure that the working conditions in schools are more attractive, that we can support our teachers of whatever race, whatever national origin they are, that we support them and that we make it an attractive profession to be in and to stay in, and that the schools are places where they feel like they can succeed. And we're seeing those kinds of ideas. We heard about it from the educators on our last panel about what it is that they want in their schools.
A distinct but related question is teacher assignment. something that has been an issue with the Vergara decision in California. And you wrote a letter to districts earlier this month, and you wrote, schools serving the most Black and Latino students are 1.5 times more likely to employ teachers who are newest to the profession as compared to schools serving the fewest of those students. So are the students who need help the most being exposed to the teachers who may be least equipped by experience to deliver it?
All too often, that's the reality that we see. So it's not universally true, but all too often it is the reality that we see. And we need to be engaged in creative efforts to change that. And we can. So part of the reason I wrote the letter, and thank you for reading it and then quoting from it, you and my mother. Both read my notes, but thank you.
It's a long letter.
It is, it is.
Footnotes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do you have any more quotes from it? But you know, one of the reasons that we said that is that we wanted to be very clear to our educators all over the country that that's not the reality that we want for our kids. We want to have our highest performing principals, our very best teachers, teaching the kids who have the very greatest needs. We want to be able to be communicating all over the country that the best jobs are the jobs in the schools that are lowest performing, that have the highest needs. That's where you're needed. Go there. We will support you, and we will make it possible for your kids. And there are things that we can do today, and we ought to be doing those things today.
Doing them? Are the districts doing this well?
There are districts that are doing it well. There are a handful, and they're few and far between. So we need to see more.
Charlotte is one that has tried a program?
Charlotte's ones that tried it. Frankly, hearing here in Des Moines, hearing what we heard in this panel about the kinds of opportunities that the North high school principal talking about what we expect for our kids and what we're going to change in the school, that we expect our kids to be in the classroom when the passage period ends, that we will have technology available to support our kids, that we will reduce our suspension and expulsion rates, that we will support working conditions. That's how you get teachers to come and stay and succeed in schools. You make it a job where the teacher feels like they can succeed. I don't know a single teacher who went into the profession to make money. I know teachers who went into the profession because they believe in the future and they want to change the world. So if we give them the opportunity to do that and to make that difference, they will they will stay, and then they will make a huge difference in the lives of those kids.
I want to bring in the audience. Want to bring in the audience in a minute, but I want to ask you about one other area that your office has been investigating and been involved in looking at, which has been getting a lot of attention, a lot of concern around the country, and that's sexual violence in a school setting. What are you learning about the adequacy of the way both post-secondary and K-12 systems are dealing with this problem?
Well, what I'm learning and what we knew is that we aren't dealing with the problem well enough. So it's time to change that. It's well past time that we should be able to expect that all of our students will be safe in school, and that sexual violence is not a rite of passage for youth, and it should not be part of schooling conditions. We've had lots of national conversation about that issue at the higher education level, and that's incredibly important. I'm glad we've had the conversation. We also need to be in conversation about it at the K-12 level. We see incredible sexual violence and sexual harassment for our students in middle school, in elementary school, in high school, in ways that I find enormously disturbing. We have to change our expectations for our students. We have to change the way that we deliver. And there is a real nexus with the diversity question that we're talking about. The research data shows that young women of color are slightly more likely to be subject to sexual violence than are white women. So it's as high, the estimates are that the rates are as high as 33.5% for multiracial women. So the diversity question does dovetail in ways that are significant on the issue of sexual violence, and we absolutely should change that. I have mentioned my children. I have daughters who are 8 and 10 years old. I hope very much that their experience in school and their experience in college will be very different from the experience that I read about in the investigations.
Do you think we're at a critical mass, particularly at the post-secondary level, where things are going to change in a significant way, or is it still a long way? I mean, where do you think we are in the continuum of change?
So we haven't gotten to the mountaintop, first of all. So we need to keep our feet in the struggle on that continuum, and we have dramatically changed the landscape. I am amazed by what I'm seeing around the country in terms of the ways that schools, colleges, universities in particular, are responding today, where when they are doing their orientation programs for students, they are talking about what consent means, what's appropriate, what they don't tolerate at their school sites as a way of welcoming their students to the college. That's important. We need to make sure that our students understand that they're safe. I want to see that sea change in the K-12 level as well, and we're not quite there yet.
You know, I can tell that you haven't been in Washington that long because you answer every question. I mean, it's an amazing, it's like, yes, no, we're not doing enough. It's like, we know we're not in Washington anymore. Let's bring in the audience for some questions of their own. Go ahead over here.
Thank you, Rick Smith. I can't resist a political question. I'm sure you know that we have a hotly contested Senate race here in Iowa. One of those candidates is running on a campaign to abolish the Department of Education. And she's not just picking on you. She doesn't want to just fire you. She'd like to get rid of the EPA as well. But how is it in this global economy, when we want to raise our national standards on education, we've got Senate candidates actually calling for the abolishment of the Department of Education? How could we possibly meet our national standards if we eliminated the Federal Department of Education?
So I obviously have a stake in that fight, but so let me say that I'm not taking a position about any particular candidate, although I do hope all of you go out and vote. And so let me really support voting and also support the Department of Education. It is my view that we do incredible work and that we are incredibly valuable in terms of delivery of educational opportunity for students and sending a message around the country about the ways that we want to treat all of our populace and who we are as a country. So it's my hope that I will be fully employed after this election, and it is my belief that we have an ongoing need to be able to stay focused at a cabinet level on the issue of education for our youth, because it is just that critical for our country.
My name is Sarah Tillinghast. I'm a teacher in Des Moines Public Schools, and I'm working with an initiative called Dream to Teach, which is a Des Moines Public Schools program to mentor young people of color who want to be teachers. I just wanted to highlight the fact that you are the first person that we've heard from today who has mentioned African Americans as part of the growing diverse population. And you briefly talked about some of the statistics as far as the AP course enrollment, the low AP course enrollment, as well as the high rates of referrals. I'd like for you to speak just briefly about some of the challenges that our African American youth are facing, and what are some of the suggestions that you have for us, and of course, repeat your website.
So the website is, well, our website is OCR in general, .gov, but ocr.data.ed.gov is the website to be able to access our data. So I'm sorry, it's OCR data, one word, .ed.gov, to be able to access the data that we've been describing, and I hope you all will and that you will use it. On the challenges for our black youth in school, they are in too many ways the same challenges that they have been for the 50 years that my office has been in existence. The genesis for the Office for Civil Rights was to deliver the promise of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which is that we would deliver education on an equal basis for all of our students. We have made enormous strides in the 50 years that we've been in existence, and we haven't come far enough. So my mother attended racially segregated schools before and after Brown versus Board of Education was decided. I didn't. That's progress. But we do have too many kids who are attending schools that are segregated in functionally the same ways. And some of the messages that we are communicating to our students today are the very same, very ugly messages that we communicated to my mother and to her generation in the 1940s and 1950s. And so we must celebrate our progress. We must be pleased about how far we've come. And we must recognize how much farther we still have to travel to make sure that we're able to deliver the education that we want for all of our students. And when I start the data with the note that our black youth are 3 times more likely to be suspended or expelled from school than their white peers, I feel like I don't need to say more than that, to say we are not treating our black kids like they are the valuable people that they are in schools, and we're not educating them well. When you push a kid out of school, when you suspend the kid or you expel the kid from school, that kid's not learning. You know, that kid's not learning math, that kid's not learning calculus, that kid's not learning science. That kid is learning that we don't believe in that kid. That kid is learning that our school system isn't ready for that kid, and there's got to be another way that we can treat all of our students so that they are full participants in our schools. And so there are so many more dimensions in addition to suspension and expulsion that dramatically impact our black youth. But what we know is that we haven't made it as far as we need to make it to be able to deliver for them.
Hello, hola. My name is Yolanda Cintron. I just kind of want to make a comment. We talked about high school and helping students look at a future whether it's college or whatever it may be. But we also have to think about helping them out in college. Because yeah, you have all the dreams to, and by the way, I used to work for the Des Moines Public Schools, and I also used to work for Drake. So I've worked with high school and beyond high school. And in that sense, I was one of those students that didn't do very well. As a matter of fact, I always used to say, if you're taking English 100, I'm taking English 99, because I'm still working on my run-on sentences at that point. But I went to very private, small, liberal arts schools in Illinois, and they helped me through all this. So I think, yeah, education is, it's going to be the foundation of where we are at. But we also have to help them beyond high school. We have to hold their hand. So to Brenda VASQUEZ, I would say, just go to a school that forgives your loan. And that will be the one that you will teach at. So North, if you want to forgive her loan, I think she'll go there. Okay, thank you.
And just to follow up on that, I mean, the data is we have made a lot of progress in African American and Hispanic kids starting college, but the gap in completion remains very formidable. What is the biggest, what is the attrition from? Why are we losing kids along the way? We get them through high school, we get them into higher education, we're having trouble having them finish. Is it financial? Is it preparation? What are the biggest barriers?
There are so many. I want to stop and pause at the increases in rates of graduation from high school period, which is extraordinary. We've increased our Latino graduation rates by more than 50% in the life of this administration, which is enormous and amazing. And the increases in our college going rates are enormous, where we're seeing 100,000 more Latino youth in college now than had been every year before this administration began. So we're seeing enormous gains, which we need to celebrate. Then on the completion rates, college is hard, and it's hard to pay for. It's hard if you're first generation going to college in your family. It's hard to succeed. The sexual violence rates are very stark. They really push a lot of kids out. The things that people are saying to us is that I'm dropping classes. I don't feel like I can succeed. I don't feel like my school wants me there. There are lots of ways that it's hard to make the transition to adulthood. As we were hearing on the last panel, there are a lot of kids who have responsibilities in their homes for younger siblings, for income for their families, to make sure that they can help that family make it through. So college is hard for a lot of people, and our colleges aren't communicating support, expectations, ways to make sure that kids can get there. And there are lots of dimensions to that issue as well. I mean, when we see our foster youth going to college, they don't have some place to go home to for the summer break. So if the college doesn't have a place for them to stay, where are they going to go? What we are seeing is dramatic recognition now of the number of kids who are college athletes, who've made it and they're really succeeding, but who are homeless. So they don't have some place to go. So if we don't find a way to support all of our learners, all the ways that they learn in school, then we're not going to be able to keep them there and see their success. And so that there's real challenge still for us.
Okay, over here.
Ron and Catherine, thank you very much for this important conversation. My name is Rich Salas, Des Moines University. Although race and ethnicity are part of contributing to the Next America, we have not discussed an important segment of the Next America, the LGBT community that impacts Black, African American, Native American, every race and ethnicity. My question to you, Catherine, is the following. What kind of support service is the Office of Civil Rights offering or promoting for this specific fast and growing segment of our community, whether in schools or in society in general?
So we are working incredibly hard for this community, and I really appreciate your raising this level of diversity. The other big diversity component that we haven't really talked about today is also disability-based diversity, and I think all of those components are things that are really important for us to be talking about as we talk about diversity. My office has jurisdiction over three main areas. One is race, one is sex, and one is disability. I don't have jurisdiction over sexual orientation, so we try to make sex-based discrimination a big tent, and there's a lot that we can cover within that. So where people are discriminating based on gender-based notions about how a student should perform his or her gender, then we are able to enforce, and we do. And we have put out guidance that has explained that Title IX, which is the sex discrimination statute that we enforce, covers gender nonconformity and students who are transgender, so it's the first time we've spoken to that issue. I'm very proud that we were able to do it. We just, now 2 weeks ago, entered into a resolution agreement in a California school district on behalf of a student who is a transgender student who had been very badly harassed in her elementary school, and the district has now committed to ensuring that that student is able to be supported in a full and appropriate learner in her school going forward, which I'm enormously pleased that we were able to do. We have been able to stand with a number of students and districts across the country where kids are being harassed or bullied based on gender nonconformance, and so where kids have been told that they're too effete if they're boys or they're too masculine if they're girls, and that they're called names I'm not going to say on the stage for the ways that they've been treated. We've been there for them and we support them. So it's a very aggressive part of our enforcement agenda, and it's incredibly important to us that we're able to serve those kids as fully and effectively as we can.
Over here.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Nancy Wiratsi, and I do provide an after-school program. It's a computer coding class for the underserved minority youth, mainly refugee population. What I've realized is this: most African students, and we have about 16,000 here in Des Moines, African population, and mainly 85% of that is refugee. They're usually considered or classified as African Americans. But when you look at it, there's a lot of challenges between the two groups, and mainly English being a second language. How does your office address such issues, or do they have staff that can address such issues? Because they're refugees, they're coming from a different country and they know nothing.
Yeah. So you raised such a set of important issues, and you may have noticed that I don't use the term African American, and one of the reasons I don't use that term is that I want to be fully inclusive of my community and the Black community that is here in the United States. The ways that we are active in our enforcement work and in our guidance discussions about national origin discrimination and race discrimination try to take account of the ways that they can overlap and sometimes they don't overlap, and that we are very clear that all of our students need to be respected as learners, and that we're there to support them in schools. And so there are lots of dimensions to the ways that national origin discrimination can take place, and that English language learner status can be disrespected in schools, and we look for ways to support all of our students regardless of where they're from.
Time is ticking, so real quick, 2 final questions.
Hello, my name is Danya Harvey. I'm an AmeriCorps volunteering service to America, serving at Oak Ridge neighborhood here in Des Moines. My mother worked in the grandparent program here in Des Moines at an elementary school, and she was in a classroom with a teacher with Teach for America. And that teacher made a comment to my mother that I wasn't trained to work with these people. So my question to you, being in the position you are, what training have or is available for Teach for America students, because they're all over the nation? And if we have so many children of diversity, how are they going to be trained or able or equipped to train our wonderful students?
So Teach for America, as you know, offers its own training to its core, and I love them for it. I'm glad they do it, and think it's really terrific. And in addition, we think it's really important for teachers of every stripe to be able to have ongoing professional development and to be fully participant in ways that are available to them either through their districts or through the universities that have trained them to make sure that they are ready and prepared to teach the students who are actually in front of them in their classes. And one of the things that we're working on department-wide, not specifically for Teach for America, but to prepare our teachers in general, is a better way to make sure that we are training our teachers so that they're ready for the students.
Real quick, since we're ready.
I'm Russ Lovell. I'm a law professor at Drake, the co-chair of the NAACP Legal Redress Committee for 20 years. You mentioned the legal tools that are available are much more limited, and I think you're referring to schools desegregation. The Supreme Court, like the Vietnam War, we declared victory in 1990 and said it was over and left, and we've virtually ended affirmative action. But on the question in terms of diversity training and so on, I believe that I've done that kind of training, but I'm a much bigger believer that, hey, if you live in the community, you're involved in the community, your kids go to the same schools, you're going to be a much more inclined to be welcoming and understanding. I guess, one of the limited tools I think that's still available, but I think is on the decline, is the use of municipal residence requirements, whether it's for police, fire, or teachers. And I wondered if your thoughts on that and whether your office encourages or promotes that.
So we don't particularly take a position on municipal residence requirements, although I'm glad to hear that your feeling is that it's working well here. My
Well as it could here.
So we should see more of it then. That sounds like something to expand. But my flip remark was that affirmative action is not dead. We've spoken 3 times in the last 2 years on the continued viability of affirmative action across the country and the ways that use of race can still be permissible and the circumstances under which it is. And so I really think it's important for people to hear that and not to think that affirmative action, that the bell has tolled for it. There still are ways to use it, and I hope that people will still use it consistent with what parameters the United States Supreme Court has set. In addition, we are doing just a ton of work trying to share best practices and share ways that places can diversify their workforces as well as their student core.
Let me ask you one final kind of summary question real quick. I know you've got to run. Your job requires you to look mostly at the places where we're failing to meet our ideals. But when you look at the big picture now, as we are experiencing this profound demographic change, probably the most profound since the turn of the 20th century, how do you think we're doing? How are we adapting to it, and what do you think it'll look like in 10 years?
So I have a very both-and perspective on that. I think we're not doing well enough, and I am surprised, dismayed, shocked by the stories that I see in our enforcement work that are the same tired forms of discrimination. I am surprised, dismayed, shocked by some of the new and morphed forms of discrimination that I wasn't looking for, wouldn't have predicted, and can't believe somebody subjects a child to. So that part of my reality is a daily part of what I see, what I live in doing the enforcement work that we do. And I am so thrilled by the pockets of excellence that I hear about, by the opportunities that I hear about, by the amazing students that I saw today on this panel who are the future that we want to support, who are being well educated by their public schools here now, and who have teachers they could name from the stage who supported them, who believed in them, who were there for them, and who have a superintendent who promises them a job when they finish college. So I find that really exciting, and who want to come back and want to give back and want to be part of the education community going forward. So that to me is what's sustaining. That to me is what helps me to put one foot in front of the other. That to me cannot be gainsaid, cannot be lost as we come together to do this work. Look at this room. It's functionally standing room only. People are sitting in the back without chairs because there's so much commitment to this topic and to thinking about what we can do. We have enormously committed, successful, effective educators here in Des Moines, which is counter to stereotype, who are working specifically on diversity and delivering it for their kids. And so I think there are places that are amazing that I can't believe kids get an opportunity to learn in and be part of and see for their future, and it gives me hope and it makes me think that we can do it and we will do so much better. And I hope in 10 years things will be dramatically better than they are today, and that can only happen if we're arm in arm doing it. So thank you, and we should continue that.
Well, I think I can speak for everybody. You've given us an incredible amount to think about and chew on. Join me in thanking Catherine Lehman. And Joanna, some final words. Thank you so much. That was great. Really appreciate it. I know you got to run.
Thank you so much to Catherine and to Ron, as well as our other moderators, Reka and Rob and Matt. Thank you all for being here. And a very special thank you to Emerson Collective, Des Moines Public Schools, Drake University, and United Way of Central Iowa for generously supporting our event. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.